My son Adam banned me from his wedding because his rich in-laws thought I was too poor to be seen with them. Then he sent me a bill for $150,000 to pay for his party and his honeymoon. He even had the nerve to add a little note, "Be thankful I'm letting you contribute." I just smiled. They thought they were humiliating a poor, confused old man. They had no idea they had just declared war on the man who secretly held their entire future in his hands, and I was about to turn their dream wedding into a nightmare they would never forget. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you, let me know in the comments below. And please like and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. I'm George Anderson, 71 years old, and I was standing in my kitchen in Montclair, New Jersey, watching the water drip from the faucet. It was a rhythmic, annoying sound. Drip, drip, drip. I'd been meaning to fix that washer for a week. The truth is, I enjoyed the simplicity of fixing things myself. It reminded me of a time when life was simpler. My kitchen is old. The linoleum is original from 1978, a pale yellow pattern that has faded under the morning sun. The countertops are laminate worn but clean. It's a good kitchen. It's seen 45 years of life. It was the kitchen my late wife Clara and I built our family in. I was reheating coffee on the stove when I heard the sound of an engine that didn't belong in this neighborhood. It wasn't the rumble of my neighbor's pickup. It was a high-pitched electric whine. A brand-new Tesla Pearl White pulled into my driveway, looking as out of place as a spaceship in a cornfield. My son Adam got out of the passenger side. He looked nervous. He always looks nervous these days. Then she got out of the driver's side. Brooke. My son's fiancée. Brooke Davenport is a woman who doesn't just enter a room. She assesses it for its weaknesses. She's 30, beautiful in the way a sterile magazine advertisement is beautiful, and she carries herself with an arrogance that only new money can buy. They walked up the cracked pathway to my door. I opened it before they could knock. "Adam, Brooke, what a surprise." Adam gave me a quick, awkward hug, the kind a teenager gives his aunt. "Hey, Dad." We were in the area. Brooke did not hug me. She offered a cheek for me to kiss, and I could smell the expensive, heavy perfume. "George," she said, her voice a smooth, practiced monotone. She stepped inside, and her eyes immediately began their work. I watched her gaze sweep across my living room. She scanned the old, comfortable armchair where Clara used to read. She scanned the bookshelf overflowing with worn paperbacks. She scanned the framed photos on the wall, Adam as a boy, me and Clara on our wedding day. Her eyes lingered on the water stain on the ceiling from a leak I'd fixed 5 years ago. "This is charming," she said. The word charming came out of her mouth, sounding like conwom. "Can I get you some coffee?" I asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Oh, goodness, no," Brooke said, following me. She stopped dead in the doorway of the kitchen. Her perfectly sculpted nose wrinkled. "George, what is that smell?" "It's coffee, Brooke. I was just reheating some. Reheating on the stove." She looked at my old percolator as if it were a piece of medieval farm equipment. "Adam, darling, your father doesn't have an espresso machine. We must get him one. Something simple. An espresso, perhaps." Adam just rubbed the back of his neck. "It's fine, Brooke. Dad likes his coffee this way." "Nonsense," she said, dismissing my son and me with a wave of her hand. She pulled out one of my wooden dining chairs, and in a gesture so subtle it was almost invisible, she discreetly wiped the seat with a silk handkerchief from her purse before sitting down. "So," I said, leaning against the counter, "what brings you two out to the suburbs?" Adam cleared his throat. "Well, Dad, we have good news. Great news, actually. We've set the date. The wedding. It's happening." "That's wonderful, son," I said, and I meant it. Despite my reservations about Brooke, I wanted my son to be happy. "When is the big day, October 12th, Brooke jumped in. It's going to be at the Davenport Country Club. My father is flying in the chef from Percé for the tasting menu. She paused, then added with a tight smile, "You've probably never heard of it." "I'm sure it will be lovely," I said. Brooke leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "George, we need to talk about the guest list. My parents are, well, they're very particular. We're expecting Governor Whitman, possibly a senator, and several of my father's business partners from Texas." She looked at me, her eyes doing that cold calculation again. "It's an extremely high-profile event. The standards, they're just different. My parents are very much looking forward to meeting you. We just hope everything will be appropriate." Appropriate. There was that word. A word that means nothing and everything. My mind drifted, as it often does, back to Clara. My Clara. What Brooke, with her new money Tesla and her country club wedding, could never understand was that Clara came from that world. She was a Cabot from one of the oldest, wealthiest families in Boston. Her inheritance was quiet, vast, and managed by men in suits in buildings I'd never entered. When I met her, I was a young architect with nothing but ideas. I fell in love with her spirit, her laugh. She fell in love with my simplicity. When we got married, her family nearly disowned her for marrying the help. Clara was the one who insisted we live here in this small, unassuming house in Montclair. She despised the costume of wealth, as she called it. "Wealth is a responsibility, George," she always said, "not a performance." She was terrified of what inherited money could do. She'd seen it rot her cousins from the inside out. She worried about Adam. Even when he was a boy, she saw that softness in him. Not weakness, she'd say, but a neediness. A need to be liked, to fit in. She worried he'd be vulnerable to exactly this. Vulnerable to a woman who saw a last name and an inheritance, not a person. After Clara passed 10 years ago, I didn't change a thing. I could have sold this house and moved into a penthouse in Manhattan. I could have bought a fleet of cars. But what for? This house was my home. This life was my choice. I continued my work, quietly managing the assets Clara and I had built together, consulting on major architectural projects under a different firm's name. To the world, and even to my own son, I was just George, the retired architect, the widower, the simple, quiet man in the old house. Clara had wanted Adam to make his own way, and I had honored that. I let him find his own job. I let him live his own life. I never told him the truth about the full extent of our finances. I thought I was protecting him. I realize now, looking at Brooke's condescending smile, I wasn't protecting him. I was just making him an easy target. "So," Brooke was saying, snapping me back to the present, "I was thinking, George, perhaps I could send my personal stylist over to help you. Find you a nice suit. Something modern. As a gift, of course. A charity case." She smiled as if she had just offered to save a stray dog. Adam was looking at the floor, tracing the pattern of the linoleum with his shoe. I smiled back. A calm, gentle smile. "That's very thoughtful of you, Brooke, but I'm sure I can find something suitable in my closet." She sighed, a little puff of exasperation. "Of course. Well, we must be going. We have an appointment with the florist. You know they're flying in orchids from Hawaii." They stood up. Adam gave me that same awkward half-hug. Brooke just nodded. "We'll see you soon, George. We'll talk more." I watched them get into their silent white spaceship and glide away. I closed the door, walked back to the kitchen, and looked at the dripping faucet. Drip, 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 like a countdown. A few days later, Adam came back. This time he was alone. He was driving his own car, an older BMW that I knew he was struggling to make payments on. He didn't come in right away. He sat in the driveway for a full 5 minutes, just staring at my front door. I knew. Before he even rang the bell, I knew what this was. This was the visit. I opened the door, and he flinched, as if he'd been caught doing something wrong. Hey, Dad, can I, can I come in? It's your home, Adam. You don't have to ask. He walked into the living room, but didn't sit. He just stood in the middle of the rug, wringing his hands. He looked pale. What's wrong, son? Dad, he started. He swallowed hard. I, I had a long talk with Brooke, and with the Davenports. They flew in yesterday. Ah, Philip and Diana. How are they? They're, they're great, Dad. They're just, you know, very particular. I finished for him. Yeah, exactly. Particular. He took a deep breath. Look, Dad, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to say, but we think it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding. There it was, the clean, sharp cut. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. I wanted to see if the son I raised was still in there. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the water stain on the ceiling. It's not that we don't love you. He rushed on the words, tumbling out in a pre-rehearsed cascade of excuses. It's just, this wedding it's a very specific crowd. You know Governor Whitman, like Brooke said. Business partners from Texas. It's a merger, Dad. That's what Philip calls it. A merger of two families. And I said, my voice quiet, don't fit the brand. Adam winced. I wouldn't say that, it's just, you'd be uncomfortable, Dad. You don't know these people. You don't have, you know, the right things to talk about. The right attire. He was quoting her directly. He was a puppet, and her hand was so far up his back, I could see her fingernails. You'd be all alone, he continued, and everyone would be looking. We just don't want you to feel awkward. This is really for your benefit, Dad, so you don't have to feel out of place. I felt the anger rise, but it wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was an Arctic cold. It was a clarity so sharp it hurt. He wasn't just barring me. He was patronizing me. He was telling me this was for my good. I see, I said. My voice was perfectly flat. Adam, mistaking my silence for acceptance, let out a huge sigh of relief. He actually laughed. Oh, thank God. I knew you'd understand. You're the best dad. You always get it. Look, I promise we'll do a small dinner, just us, after the honeymoon. We'll celebrate properly then. This just makes everything so much smoother. He moved to hug me, but I took a small step back. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. But he felt it. He stopped, his hands frozen in midair. Dad. It's fine, Adam, I said. If this is what you and Brooke and the Davenports have decided, then that is what will happen. I turned and walked toward my study. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some bills to pay. You can see yourself out. I didn't look back. I heard him stand there for a moment. I heard him say, Dad, one more time, his voice small, uncertain. Then I heard the front door open and close. I sat at my desk, the same desk Clara and I bought at a flea market in 1980. I didn't feel sadness. I felt pity. I pitied the boy I had raised, who had become so weak, so desperate for approval, that he would sell his own father for a smooth party. I looked at the photo of Clara on my desk. She was smiling, her eyes bright and intelligent. You were right, my love, I whispered to the empty room. You were right about him. He's been consumed by the very thing you tried to protect him from. I sat there for a long time. The anger didn't come. The grief didn't come. What came was a plan. Clara hadn't just been a good woman. She had been a brilliant woman. And she had taught me how to be smart too. She had known even then that this day might come. And she had left me one final gift, a failsafe. All right, Adam, I said to the silence. You want a merger? Let's see how your new family handles a hostile takeover. Another week passed. The silence from Adam was total. Not a call, not a text. He was relieved. He had done the dirty work, and now he could get on with his perfect new, smooth life. I spent that week in my garden. I was pruning the roses Clara had planted. It was methodical work. Snip, snip, snip. Removing the dead wood to let the new growth thrive. A fitting metaphor. On Thursday, 2 weeks before the wedding, a FedEx truck pulled up. A courier handed me a large, stiff envelope. It was heavy, too heavy to be an apology card. I took it into the kitchen. I opened it with the same shears I'd been using on the roses. It wasn't a letter. It was a portfolio. It was bound in thick navy blue leather. On the front, embossed in gold lettering, it read, "From the office of Adam and Brooke Anderson Davenport." My heart didn't sink. It didn't pound. It just stopped. They had already combined their names. A merger indeed. I opened the cover. Inside, on thick, creamy cardstock, was a single, professionally printed page. It looked like an invoice from a high-end law firm. At the top it read, "Contribution from the estate of Clara Anderson on behalf of the groom's family." And then the itemized list. Item venue deposit Davenport Country Club. Platinum package, $50,000. Item catering and bar service per se. Affiliate, 300 guests, $75,000. Item, Honeymoon Maldives. First class suite and private transport, $25,000, a polite line. And then the total. Total due $150,000. I stared at the number. $150,000. Attached to the top of the invoice with a shiny gold paperclip was a handwritten note. It was Adam's handwriting. Sloppy, entitled "The Handwriting of a Boy Who Never Learned to Finish His Chores." "Dad," it began, "I know you're not coming, but Brooke said you should still be thankful I'm letting you contribute. This is the amount from Mom's trust for my wedding. The bank said you're the executor, so just wire the funds to the account number below by the 15th. Thanks." I read the note again. "Be thankful I'm letting you contribute." I stood there in my old yellow kitchen with the faucet dripping. Drip, drip, drip. And I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound that I hadn't made in years. It was the sound of a lock finally clicking into place. The sound of a dam breaking. They hadn't just banned me. They hadn't just insulted me. They had billed me for the privilege of being humiliated. They thought I was a confused old man. They thought I was a checkbook. They thought Clara's trust was a piggy bank that I was just holding for them. "Oh, Adam," I whispered, the laugh still shaking my shoulders. "You poor, stupid, foolish boy. You didn't just forget who your father is. You forgot exactly who your mother was. You think this is your money. You think this is an allowance. This isn't an inheritance, son. It's a test. And you, your bride, and your arrogant new family. You just failed. Spectacularly." I picked up my old yellowing rotary phone from the wall. My fingers steady as a surgeon's dialed the number I knew by heart. The phone rang twice. "Cunningham, Miles and Associates. This is Miles speaking." "Miles." I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "It's George Anderson." There was a pause. "George, it's been too long. Is everything all right?" "Everything is crystal clear," I said. "We have a problem. Or rather, my son has a problem." I looked down at the $150,000 invoice. "Miles, it's about Clara's character clause. They've finally triggered it." I held the phone to my ear, the receiver cold against my skin. The laughter in my chest had stopped, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. My heart was perfectly still, beating with the slow, steady rhythm of an engine that has just been tuned for a long race. "Cunningham, Miles and Associates. This is Miles speaking." "Miles," I said, my voice clear. "It's George Anderson." There was a pause on the line. Not a pause of surprise, but of immediate recognition. Miles Cunningham wasn't just some lawyer I'd found in the phone book. He was Clara's lawyer. Our lawyer. He was the only other person on earth who knew the truth. "George," he said, his voice instantly dropping the professional lilt. "It's been too long. Is everything all right?" "Everything is crystal clear, Miles," I said. I looked down at the gold-embossed invoice. "We have a problem. Or rather, my son has a problem. I'm looking at my calendar, George. I'm booked until next week." "Now, Miles," I said, "I'm on my way." I didn't take my old pickup truck. I walked to the back of the garage past the lawnmower and the rusty garden shears to the corner that was always covered by a heavy canvas tarp. I pulled it back. The 1995 Bentley Mulsanne Clara's car gleamed a deep dark green in the dim light. It smelled of old leather and history. The engine turned over with a deep, satisfied hum that you could feel in your chest. I drove out of Montclair, out of my role as the simple, retired architect. I drove 20 minutes to Morristown. Miles's office wasn't in a flashy glass tower. It was as it had always been in a century-old brownstone on a quiet side street. The only sign was a small, discreet brass nameplate, Cunningham. This was old money. This was Clara's world. His assistant knew me by sight. I was shown straight up the winding staircase. Miles's office was lined with dark mahogany bookshelves, filled not with law books, but with leather-bound first editions. A small fire crackled in the marble hearth, chasing away the early autumn chill. Miles Cunningham stood up from behind his massive desk. He was an impeccable man, sharp in a three-piece suit, but his eyes were kind. He had been Clara's closest friend long before he became her lawyer. He was the one who helped her navigate the complex, suffocating world of her family's wealth. "George," he said, shaking my hand warmly, "you look resolved." "I feel resolved, Miles." "Coffee, please." I didn't sit. I walked to the tall window looking down at the people rushing by on the street. "They banned me from the wedding, Miles." Miles stopped in the middle of pouring the coffee. The silver pot hovered in the air. "They... what?" "My son, and his fiancée, and her family. They said I would be out of place, that I would make their high-profile guests uncomfortable, that it was for my own benefit." Miles set the cup down. The clink of porcelain against the saucer was the only sound in the room. "That ungrateful, entitled, after everything. It gets better," I said. I walked over to his pristine 19th century desk. I took the navy blue leather portfolio out of my old worn canvas tote bag and laid it on the blotter. "This arrived this morning, by courier." Miles put on his reading glasses. He opened the portfolio. He read the invoice. I watched his face. First his brow furrowed in confusion. Then, as he read the itemized list, his face paled with a quiet rage. But when he got to the bottom, to the handwritten note from Adam, "Be thankful I'm letting you contribute," something else happened. He looked up at me, and he smiled. A wide, shark-like smile. "My God," Miles whispered, leaning back in his chair. "He actually did it. He put it in writing." "He did," I said. "The character clause," Miles said almost to himself. "Clara was a genius, an absolute stone-cold genius." "She always was," I said. I finally took a sip of the coffee. It was strong, perfect. Miles looked at me, the smile still on his face. "He really doesn't know, does he? After all these years, he has no idea what his mother actually did." "He has no idea who I am," I corrected. "He sees a simple old man in a crumbling house. He thinks Clara's trust is an ATM and that I'm just the teller who forgot the password." Miles got up and walked to a heavy fireproof safe hidden behind a painting of a stormy sea. He worked the combination with practiced hands and pulled out a thick, bound document. This wasn't a copy. This was the original. The last will and testament of Clara Cabot Anderson. Let's review the terms, shall we? Miles said, his voice now crisp, professional, the lawyer taking over. Just to ensure we are proceeding appropriately. He placed the will on the desk and opened it. The Clara Anderson Marital Trust. Upon her death, all assets, liquid and property valued at the time of her passing at $12,400,000, were placed in this irrevocable trust. I remember, I said. The sole beneficiary, he read, is her son Adam Anderson. However, he paused, savoring the word. The trust is to be managed by her husband, George Anderson, as the sole executor and trustee for the duration of his natural life. He put the paper down and looked at me. They think you're just a gatekeeper, George. They don't understand. You're not just the gatekeeper. You are the owner of the gate, the key, and the entire estate it protects. And then, I prompted, the beautiful part. Miles smiled again. Ah, yes. Page 4, paragraph 3, the character clause. He cleared his throat and read aloud. The assets of this trust are intended to support a life of purpose, responsibility, and integrity. The beneficiary, Adam Anderson, may only draw upon the principal funds after demonstrating to the sole and absolute satisfaction of the trustee a life built on solid moral footing. He looked up at me. And then Clara's masterstroke, the definitions. He read again. This moral footing is defined as but not limited to 1, maintaining gainful employment, 2, demonstrating financial prudence, and 3, he tapped the paper with his finger, demonstrating unwavering loyalty, gratitude, and familial respect toward his father, George Anderson, who raised him. Unwavering loyalty, I repeated. The words tasted like victory. The clause specifies, Miles continued, that should the beneficiary Adam fail to meet these standards in the sole discretion of the trustee is instructed to, what's the phrase she used? Protect the Anderson Cabot legacy from dilution by entitlement. And what happens to the money? I asked, though I already knew the answer by heart. Upon failure to meet the clause, Miles read, the trust is to be immediately and irrevocably dissolved with the full $12 million, plus all accrued interest transferred not to Adam, but to the Clara Cabot Anderson Scholarship Fund for underprivileged students of architecture, a fund, I might add, of which you, George, are the sole chairman of the board. We were silent for a moment. The fire crackled in the hearth. She knew, I said quietly. She knew he was weak. She knew someone like Brooke would come along eventually. She didn't want to just give him money, George, Miles said gently. She wanted to give him a reason to become a good man. She built him a safety net, but she also built in a kill switch just in case he decided to set the net on fire. And that's exactly what he's done. He's planning a merger, I said. He's marrying into the Davenport family. New money from Texas. All flash, no foundation. They think they're marrying into Clara's legacy. And instead, Miles said, they're marrying a 35-year-old boy who is as of this moment completely and totally broke. Because I checked this morning, George. His BMW payment is 2 months late. He's maxed out 3 credit cards. That merger isn't a merger. It's a bailout. And he needs this $150,000 to seal the deal and impress his new family. He thinks it's his, I said. He thinks this invoice is just a formality. Well, Miles said, closing the heavy will with a soft thud. He's about to learn about contract law, and about his mother, and about you. He sat down, lacing his fingers. So, George, as your lawyer and as the co-trustee of this document, I must ask, in your sole discretion, has Adam Anderson demonstrated unwavering loyalty, gratitude, and familial respect? I thought about the conversation in my kitchen, the charming house. I thought about the phone call. It's for your own benefit, Dad. I thought about the gold-embossed invoice for $150,000. I thought about the handwritten note. Be thankful I'm letting you contribute. I looked Miles dead in the eye. No, he has failed. Spectacularly. Miles grinned. Then we are in agreement. The character clause has been breached. The trust is for all intents and purposes terminated. He gets nothing. So what do we do about this? I asked, tapping the invoice. This bill for a party I'm not allowed to attend. Legally, Miles said, all business now. We shred it. We send them a certified letter informing them that the trust is dissolved, effective immediately, citing the breach. It will be clean, brutal, final. I shook my head. No, that's too fast. That's your way, Miles. The lawyer's way. Clean, efficient. What's your way, George? I thought for a moment. They've underestimated me. They've played a game thinking I'm a pawn. I'm not going to flip the board over just yet. I'm going to make a move they won't understand. I reached into the pocket of my old work pants. I pulled out my wallet, my old cracked leather wallet, the one I've carried for 30 years, the one that looks like it belongs to a simple old man. I pulled out my personal checkbook, not the trust fund checkbook, my checkbook, from the local Montclair Savings and Loan, the one with my name and address on it, the one Adam assumes has barely enough in it to cover my property taxes. George, what are you doing? You're not going to pay this. I am, I said. I am going to honor his request for a contribution. I took a pen from Miles's desk. Pay to the order of Adam and Brooke Anderson Davenport. I paused. How do you spell nightmare? I asked. Miles laughed. Just write the check, George. I wrote the amount in the box, $1, and on the memo line I wrote very clearly, full payment for groom's family contribution as requested. I tore the check from the book. I'm not sending this by courier, I said. I'm sending this in a plain white envelope with a regular stamp. Let them wait for it. Let them wonder. Let them think the confused old man is trying his best. Miles looked at the check, then at me. George Anderson, you are a devious, wonderful man. Clara would be so proud. She would, I said, putting the check in my pocket. But this is just the first move, Miles, because they're not going to accept this. No, they are not, Miles agreed. They're going to get angry, and when they get angry, they're going to get sloppy. Adam mentioned their lawyers. Let them come, Miles said, his smile turning sharp. They're bringing a bill to a gunfight. I can't wait. I stood up. I felt lighter than I had in years. The drip, drip, drip in my kitchen sink was gone. In its place was the steady drumbeat of a war that had finally officially begun. Thank you for the coffee, Miles. Thank you for the show, George. Keep me posted. And remember, I know, I said. Document everything. I walked out of the brownstone, got into my Bentley, and drove back to my simple, quiet, unassuming house in Montclair. I mailed the check at the corner post office. Then I went home. And I waited. I didn't have to wait long. I drove the Bentley back to my quiet street in Montclair, the deep hum of the engine, a silent secret in the sleepy afternoon. I parked it back in the garage under the heavy canvas tarp, letting it disappear once more. The Bentley was a ghost, a tool from another life. My life. I walked back into my house. The faucet was still dripping. Drip, drip, drip. I smiled. It was the perfect soundtrack. I went to the small, cluttered desk in my study. It's an old oak roll-top, a piece my own father used. The varnish is worn thin where my arms have rested for decades. I didn't turn on the main light. The simple green banker's lamp was enough, casting a small circle of light on the desk. I sat down the old wooden chair, groaning under my weight. I took out my personal checkbook. Not the leather-bound ledger for the trust. Not the corporate accounts. Just my simple vinyl-covered checkbook from Montclair Savings and Loan. The one with the little pictures of puppies on each check. Clara had ordered them as a joke 20 years ago, and I'd just never bothered to change them. I opened it. I looked at the invoice again. The navy blue leather portfolio was sitting on my desk, looking absurdly arrogant, next to a pile of seed catalogs. $150,000. A contribution. Be thankful. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. They thought I was a signature, a rubber stamp, a confused old man who would just obey. They thought they could ban me from the family and then bill me for the privilege. They had fundamentally misunderstood the man they were dealing with. They had forgotten who I was and who Clara was. Clara, who taught me that the best defense isn't a high wall. It's a deep moat that your enemy doesn't even see until they're already drowning in it. This check was the first bucket of water. I took out my favorite pen, a simple black ballpoint, the kind you get in a pack of 10. I wrote the date, my handwriting firm and clear. I wrote the name in the pay to the order of line. Adam and Brooke Anderson Davenport. I lingered on the name. Anderson Davenport. How presumptuous, how new. A name meant to impress, a name meant to sound like a merger. It felt good to write it down, to see it in plain ink. It anchored my resolve. Then I moved to the small box. The box for the numbers. I thought about the $12 million in the trust. I thought about the dividends it generated every quarter, enough to buy that country club, never mind just rent it for a night. I thought about the life of ease Adam could have had if he had just been a good man, if he had just been a decent son. With a hand as steady as the foundation of this house, I wrote 1.00. 100. Then the line for the written amount. I wrote it with the same care I would have used for $1 million check. $1.00, so 100 hood. It was perfect. It was exactly what they deserved. It was literal. It was insulting. And best of all, it was deniable. I'm sorry, Adam, I thought you wanted a symbolic contribution. I'm just a simple old man. I didn't understand the amount. The true beauty of the move wasn't the check itself. It was the memo line. In that small, narrow space at the bottom left, I wrote the dagger. I wrote the words that would turn this from a confused act into a calculated one. I copied the phrase from their own invoice. Memo, full payment for groom's family contribution as requested. As requested. I tore the check from the book. The sound of the perforation ripping was loud in the quiet study. It sounded like the opening shot of a war. I didn't admire it for long. I folded it crisply. I didn't put it in a fancy FedEx envelope. I didn't send it by courier. That's what they would do. I went to the kitchen drawer, the one that sticks. I pulled it open and rummaged past the rubber bands and old batteries until I found what I was looking for. A plain, white, standard-sized envelope. The kind you buy in a box of 100 for $3. I slid the $1 check inside. I licked the envelope. It tasted like cheap glue and justice. I addressed it to Adam at his flashy, overpriced apartment. The one Clara's trust had not been paying for, which, as Miles had confirmed, was why he was so desperate for this money. I rooted around in the drawer again and found a stamp. It wasn't even a nice flag stamp. It was an old congratulations stamp from a roll I'd bought 5 years ago for someone's graduation. It had a picture of balloons on it. How fitting. I stuck it on the corner. I put on my old gardening jacket, the one with the patch on the elbow, the one Brooke so clearly despised. I walked out my front door down the cracked pathway. The sun was setting. The air was cool. It was a beautiful, quiet evening in Montclair. I walked to the blue USPS mailbox on the corner of my street. I pulled the heavy metal handle. I held the white envelope over the darkness for just 1 second. This was it. This wasn't just a check. It was bait. They wouldn't be confused for long. Adam would be, but Brooke wouldn't. She would be furious. She would see this as the act of a senile old fool, or worse, an intentional insult. She would demand Adam do something, She would demand they fight back. And that's exactly what I wanted. They thought they were playing chess. They thought they had me in checkmate. They didn't realize I was playing a different game entirely. I let the envelope drop. Clang. The metal flap snapped shut. It was done. I walked back to my house. The lights of the neighborhood were coming on. I went inside, went to the kitchen, and finally fixed the dripping faucet. The silence in the house was perfect. I made myself a simple dinner, a ham and cheese sandwich. I sat at my old kitchen table and ate it. And I waited. I knew my phone wouldn't ring that night. Or the next day. It would take 2 days for the mail to arrive. 2 days for them to receive my contribution. I slept better that night than I had in 10 years. I was no longer the sad, simple old widower. I was George Anderson. And I was just getting started. I mailed the check on a Thursday afternoon. Friday was blissfully silent. I spent the day in the garden pruning back the dead wood from the azalea bushes Clara had planted by the fence. The silence from Adam's end of the line was deafening. It was the silence of pure, dumbfounded confusion. I knew my son. He would have stared at that $1 check for hours, turning it over and over, wondering if it was a mistake, a joke, or a bizarre symptom of senility. But I knew he wouldn't be the one to call me. Adam was a coward. He never handled confrontation. He outsourced it. The call I knew would come from Brooke. Saturday morning. I was in my study, the small, quiet room that smelled like old books and lemon oil. I was paying my actual bills, the electricity, the water, the gas. I was also, just for my own amusement, transferring a dividend check of $200,000 from one of the trust's offshore accounts into the Clara Anderson Scholarship Fund. It always amused me moving amounts that could buy a house, all while my neighbors saw me as the nice old man who struggled to get his recycling bin to the curb. At 10:03 in the morning, the phone rang. Not my cell phone, which I rarely use, but the old heavy rotary phone on the wall in the kitchen. Its loud mechanical brrring cut through the quiet house like an alarm bell. I walked into the kitchen, dried my hands on a towel, and let it ring a second time. A good hunter always lets the prey commit. On the third ring, I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" I said, pitching my voice to sound gentle, a little frail, perhaps a bit confused. It was not a hello. It was a roar. "Dad, what is this?" It was Adam. He sounded high-pitched, breathless, like he did when he was 12 years old and had just broken Mrs. Gable's window with a baseball. "Adam, what's wrong, son? You sound terribly upset." "Upset!" he screamed. "I'm beyond upset. A check, you sent me a check." "Of course I did," I said calmly, picturing him pacing the white marble floors of the apartment he was paying for, not me. "You sent me a bill for your contribution. I received it and I paid it. Did it not arrive?" $1, he shrieked. The word bounced down the line. $1 Is this a joke? Are you trying to ruin me? A joke, Adam? Why would I ever joke about money? It was a contribution. I'm on a fixed income, son. You know that. I looked at the bill and I gave what I could. I thought $1 was a lovely symbolic gesture. I'm very proud of you. Symbolic. He sputtered as if the word itself was choking him. Symbolic. The bill was for $150,000, Dad, not $1. It's the money from Mom's trust. You know that? Oh, goodness, I said, injecting a note of practiced confusion. 150,000. Adam, that's an enormous amount of money. I must have misread the invoice. Are you sure that seems terribly, terribly expensive for a party? I'm not sure my little savings account. Misread, he yelled. It was itemized. Dad, stop playing dumb. You're doing this on purpose. You're trying to sabotage my wedding. I heard a muffled sound. A sharp, Adam, give me the phone. Just give it to me. You're handling this all wrong. The sound of the receiver being fumbled, shuffling, and then her. A new voice. a voice as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. George, it was Brooke. The mask of the loving fiancé was gone. Let's stop playing these sad, pathetic little games, shall we? Brooke, my dear, I said, keeping my voice soft. I'm not sure I know what you mean. I was just telling Adam. Shut up, she snapped. The word hung in the air. Not please be quiet. Not hold on. Just shut up. Just shut up. She repeated, her voice low and simmering with a rage that was far more potent than Adam's childish tantrum. We are not idiots, George. We know exactly what you're doing. I'm afraid I don't. You think you're clever, don't you? You senile old fool. There it was, the truth. No more George, dear. No more charming. I was a senile old fool. I had been waiting for that. You think this is funny? She continued, her voice rising now, losing its controlled edge. You think you can humiliate Adam, humiliate me, humiliate my family with your little $1 stunt? Who in the hell do you think you are? I'm Adam's father, Brooke, and I am the executor of his mother's— You're nothing, she shrieked. You're a bitter, jealous old man, sitting in a rotting house, furious that your son is finally making something of himself, furious that he's marrying into a family with real status, something you could never give him. Brooke, I said, my voice still perfectly, maddeningly calm. This is hardly the tone for a family discussion. I'll use whatever tone I want. You listen to me, and you listen closely. We know about the trust, Clara's trust. We know there are millions in there. That is Adam's money. It is his birthright, not yours. You are just the sad little man holding the keys, and you will give them to us. Actually, Brooke, I said softly, that's not quite how the trust works. It's a bit more complicated than that. There are stipulations. Clara was very particular. I can't just— Stipulations. She laughed. It was a horrible, grating sound, completely devoid of humor. You mean the little rules you invented? The little power trip you've been on since your wife died? You think that will hold up in court? My heart gave a single, solid thump. There it was. The word. The word I had been waiting for. Court. Court, I asked. I laced my voice with the one thing I wasn't feeling. I laced it with fear. Brooke, my goodness, why would we involve the courts? This is a family matter, a simple misunderstanding. It was a family matter, she hissed. You made it a legal matter when you refused to release Adam's inheritance. You are illegally withholding funds from the beneficiary. That is a crime, George. A crime. It's not a crime, Brooke, I said gently. It's my responsibility as the trustee. You're incompetent, she shouted, and I could almost hear the click as the final piece of my plan snapped into place. That check proves it. You sent $1. You're senile. You are not mentally fit to manage your own checkbook, let alone a multi-million-dollar trust. My father's lawyers are going to destroy you. Brooke, please, I whispered, faking a tremble in my voice. Let's not threaten each other. This is so upsetting. This isn't a threat, you old man, she screamed, all pretense of civilization now completely gone. This is a promise. I am giving you 24 hours, 1 day. You will go to the bank and you will wire the full $150,000 to our wedding account. The instructions are on the invoice. She took a deep, ragged breath. If you do not, she continued, her voice dropping back to that cold, venomous hiss, on Monday morning, my father's firm is filing a petition with the court. We will have you declared mentally incompetent. We will have you removed as trustee. We will get that money. And we will make sure you end up in a state-run nursing home where you belong, staring at a wall where you can't hurt anyone ever again. The line went dead. She had hung up. I stood in the kitchen. The silence of the house rushed back in, but it was different now. It was charged. senile, incompetent, a state home. They had done it. They had actually explicitly threatened it. They were going to sue me. They were going to use my $1 check, my bait, as their primary evidence of my mental decline. They were a pack of wolves, and they had just proudly announced to the sheepdog that they were planning to attack the flock, not realizing the sheepdog was in fact a dragon. I looked at the phone in my hand for a long, satisfying moment. Then I picked up the receiver and dialed Miles. "Miles, George, it's Saturday. I do hope I'm not interrupting your golf game." There was a chuckle on the other end. "Never for this, George. How did my favorite client's contribution go over like a dream?" I said, walking back to my study. "They took the bait." Adam screamed. "Brooke called me a senile old fool." "Standard then," Miles said. But then," I said, settling into my chair. "She made a promise. She's filing a petition on Monday to have me declared mentally incompetent and removed as trustee." I heard Miles let out a low, appreciative whistle on the other end of the line. She's actually going to sue you. To prove she's worthy of the character clause," Miles asked, his voice thick with disbelief and delight. "That's the one," I said. "George," Miles said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "They didn't just walk into the trap. They've started building the cage around themselves. This is beautiful. Legally, this is poetry." "So what's our next move?" "Our move," Miles laughed. "George, our move is to do nothing. We let them file. We let them spend thousands of dollars on their high-priced Texas lawyers. We let them commit on official court documents to the position that you are mentally unfit. We let them stand up in front of a judge and swear to it." "And then," I asked. "And then," Miles said, his voice turning cold and sharp, "we introduce them to Clara's ghost. I'll clear my schedule for Monday. This is going to be the most fun I've had all year." Brooke's 24-hour deadline passed in a heavy, deliberate silence. I spent Sunday in the garden tying up the tomato plants. The air was calm. I found a peculiar peace in the waiting. I knew they weren't just sitting there. Brooke was not a woman who made idle threats. She was arrogant, she was greedy, and she was predictable. That combination was a gift. Monday morning, the silence was broken. It wasn't the brrring of the old rotary phone. It was a knock. It wasn't the friendly rap of a neighbor. It was a sharp, official, impatient sound. Rap, rap, rap. I opened the door. A man in a cheap, wrinkled suit stood on my porch. He was holding a thick manila envelope. He looked bored. "George Anderson," he mumbled, not looking me in the eye. "I am." He thrust the envelope at my chest. "You've been served." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned on his heel, walked briskly to his beat-up sedan, and drove off. I stood in the doorway holding the packet. It was heavy, warm from his hands. "You've been served." Such a mundane phrase for such a profound declaration of war. I closed the door. I walked past the kitchen. I went into my study, the small, quiet room where I had mailed the $1 check just 3 days earlier. I sat in my old wooden chair. I turned on the small green banker's lamp. I opened the envelope. The cover sheet was stark. Superior Court of New Jersey, Essex County, Civil Division. And then the names. Plaintiff Adam T. Anderson. Defendant George R. Anderson. My own son. Suing me. I turned the page, my hand perfectly steady. I wasn't reading this as a father. I was reading this as an opponent. It was a petition. A request for an emergency hearing. I read the legalese the words Brooke and her expensive Texas lawyers had chosen. They were seeking to have me, George Anderson, immediately declared mentally incompetent and incapable of managing financial affairs. They claimed I was suffering from advanced cognitive decline characterized by erratic behavior, memory loss, and severe detachment from reality. And what was their goal? The petition demanded that I be removed as the trustee of the Clara Anderson Marital Trust. It demanded that I be stripped of all financial power, and it demanded that the court immediately appoint a new guardian to protect the assets of the trust from dissipation and mismanagement. And who did they nominate as this noble guardian, the sole beneficiary Adam T. Anderson? I let out a slow breath. It was exactly as Brooke had promised. A neat, tidy legal assassination. They weren't just coming for the $150,000 anymore. That was just the appetizer. They were coming for the whole $12 million. But then I turned the page again, and I smiled. There, stapled neatly to the back, was the evidence, Exhibit A. It was a perfect, clear photocopy of my $1 check. The one with the little puppies on it. They had actually done it. They had walked into the courthouse, gone before a judge, and submitted my check as their primary proof that I was insane. I read the text of the petition that referenced it. Exhibit A clearly demonstrates the defendant's erratic financial behavior. In response to a significant six-figure family financial matter, the defendant submitted this baffling and childlike document. This is not the action of a rational trustee, but of a man profoundly confused and detached from his fiduciary duties. They had swallowed the bait, whole, but they weren't finished. I turned the page again. Exhibit B, the affidavits, the sworn statements. This was the masterpiece. First was Brooke's. I read her words, her lies, now immortalized in a legal document. I, Brooke Davenport, swear under penalty of perjury that I have witnessed George Anderson's cognitive decline firsthand over the last 6 months. He is forgetful, often failing to recall prior conversations about important family matters. The $150,000 invoice, no doubt. He is paranoid, refusing to leave his home for important events. The wedding she banned me from. He lives in a state of self-neglect, in a home that is crumbling around him. My home, the one she coveted. His actions, like the $1 check, are hostile, erratic, and, in my opinion, dangerous. He is a danger to himself and to the legacy my husband is meant to inherit. It was brilliant. Every virtue I had, my simplicity, my frugality, my desire to live quietly, had been twisted into a symptom of dementia. Then came the statement from Philip Davenport, the Texan. His was shorter. As a man of significant financial standing, I recognize irrational behavior when I see it. Mr. Anderson's response is not that of a sound mind. He is a liability. My family is deeply concerned that he will, in his confusion, dissipate his son's entire legacy. We are stepping in to protect our daughter's new family. Stepping in. What a lovely way to phrase it. But the final affidavit was the one that truly mattered. The one that sealed their fate. It was from Adam. I love my father. His statement began, the words dripping with manufactured pity. It pains me to do this, but I have seen his decline. He recently refused to attend my wedding, citing confusion and anxiety. He lives in isolation. He does not take care of himself. The $1 check. It wasn't a joke. I believe it was a cry for help from a man who knows he is losing control. I am terrified he will harm himself or the estate my mother Clara left for me. I am filing this petition not just to protect my inheritance, but to protect my father from himself. To protect me from myself. I folded the papers. I placed them neatly on the desk. They thought they were cornering a wounded animal. They thought they were being clever, using my own actions against me. They thought they were dealing with a confused, simple-minded, grieving old widower. They had no idea who my wife was. They had no idea who her lawyer was. They had just legally, in a sworn statement to a judge, committed their entire argument to paper. An argument based on the premise that I was senile. An argument based on the lie that the trust was Adam's money. They had just handed me the weapon, the ammunition, and pulled the trigger on themselves. I sat there for a long, satisfying minute. The house was perfectly silent. No faucet drip. I had fixed that. I picked up the old rotary phone. My fingers steady and sure dialed the private cell number I had for Miles Cunningham. He picked up on the second ring. "George, Miles," I said, my voice calm, almost cheerful. "Good morning. I'm afraid I have some bad news. It seems I'm mentally incompetent." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. They did it. They actually filed, signed, and delivered by a very nice man in a wrinkled suit. It's a petition for an emergency hearing. They've submitted the $1 check as Exhibit A. They've got sworn affidavits from Brooke, her father, and Adam, all testifying that I am, and I quote, "a danger to the estate." I heard a sound from Miles's end. It was a low, deep chuckle. It grew into a full, unrestrained laugh. It was the sound of a lawyer who had just been handed an open and shut case on a silver platter. "George," he finally said, catching his breath. This is magnificent. It's better than Christmas." They've just committed legal perjury. They've sworn in a court of law that their entire argument is based on what? Their feelings, their disappointment. "They've argued our entire case for us," I said. "They've confirmed in writing that they are hostile, that they are acting in bad faith, and that they have zero respect for me as trustee. They have, in essence, just handed us the keys to terminate the trust." "Exactly," Miles said, his voice now sharp and focused. "They've just proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Adam has violated the character clause. It's beautiful. So what's the date on the hearing?" I checked the cover sheet. "This Friday, 10 a.m., Judge Maria Velez." "Velez," Miles mused. "Good. She's tough. She has no patience for frivolous suits. And she hates elder abuse. Oh, this is perfect." "So what now, Miles? What's our move?" "Our move," Miles said. "George, our move is to prepare the defense of a lifetime. We are not just going to defend you. We are going to countersue. We let them have their hearing. We let Brooke and her father get on the stand and commit perjury. We let Adam cry his crocodile tears for the judge. And then," I asked, a slow smile spreading across my face. "And then," Miles said, his voice dropping to a predatory calm, "I introduced them to Clara's ghost. I'm going to bring the original will. I'm going to bring the character clause. And I am going to read it aloud in a court of law." "They'll be humiliated," I whispered. "They'll be disbarred," Miles corrected. "Well, their lawyers will be for filing a suit this frivolous. As for them, they'll be ruined. Get those papers to my office immediately, George. I'm clearing my entire schedule. I am going to enjoy this. I am really going to enjoy this." I hung up the phone. I looked at the legal documents on my desk. My death warrant, they thought. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to make a fresh pot of coffee. The sun was streaming through the window. It was a beautiful Monday morning, and I had a court date to prepare for. I didn't shred the documents. I didn't even file them. I drove them straight to Miles Cunningham's office in Morristown. The brownstone was quiet as always. His assistant, a woman who had worked for him for 30 years and knew all of Clara's secrets, took the thick manila envelope from me without a word, just a tight, supportive smile. She knew what this was. Miles had me shown into the library, not his main office. This was where the real work was done. It was a smaller room, still lined with mahogany, but dominated by a massive oak table. The fire was already lit. He was standing by the window, not in his suit jacket, but in his shirt sleeves and vest. He looked like a general preparing for battle. "They're not just sloppy, George," he said, turning as I entered. "They're arrogant, and arrogance is a gift. It makes people lazy." He gestured to the table. He had already started. The surface was covered with files. Our files. "They think they're the only ones with lawyers," he said, a cold smile playing on his lips. "They think they're filing a simple petition against a confused old man. They have no idea they're stepping into a bear trap. I placed the envelope I'd been served on the table. Exhibit A, I said. The $1 check. Miles picked it up, handling it with surgical gloves as if it were contaminated. Beautiful. And Exhibit B, the affidavits. Brooke, her father, and Adam. He really signed it, I said. It was the only part that still held a dull ache. He did, Miles said, his voice hardening. He swore under penalty of perjury that you are incompetent. He just gave us the silver bullet, George. He has legally documented his own violation of the character clause. He tapped the affidavit. This is the act of disloyalty Clara was worried about. She knew. She always knew Adam's spine was made of jelly. She knew someone like Brooke would come along and see him as a mark. Clara didn't write this will to be cruel. She wrote it to see if her son would ever become a man. Miles moved to a thick bound document at the center of the table. They are suing the trustee, he said, tapping the will. But they have never read the document. They don't know the rules. They think they do, I said. They think the rule is Adam gets the money. Their lawyers are fools then, Miles said sharply. They've clearly never tangled with a Cabot-Anderson inheritance. They're used to simple probate. This isn't simple probate, George. This is a fortress. And Clara gave you all the keys. He started to lay out our response. It was simple. It was brutal. First, he said, placing a document on the table. Our response. A flat denial of all claims. Second, he laid down another. The original certified copy of the will. We will enter this into evidence. Third, he pulled out a medical file. Your full psychiatric evaluation, the one I had you do 3 months ago. I smiled. Miles had insisted on it. Just in case, George, he'd said. A baseline. This, Miles said, tapping the psych report, is from Dr. Alistair Finch, the head of psychiatry at Columbia Presbyterian. It states you are not just competent, but in the top 1% of cognitive function for your age group. It completely invalidates their entire petition. Their evidence is a $1 check. Our evidence is the chief of psychiatry at one of the top hospitals in the country. And then the payoff, as you call it, George. He pulled out 2 more items. My worn canvas tote bag was on the chair. He reached into it and pulled out the leather-bound invoice. We present their invoice for $150,000, the one they sent before they decided you were senile. We ask them to explain how a man can be dangerously incompetent, but still competent enough to pay for their honeymoon. He then pulled out a small digital voice recorder. And finally, he said, we play this. He pressed play. I heard the hiss of the line, and then Brooke's voice, cold and furious. You senile old fool. My father's lawyers are going to destroy you. We will have you declared mentally incompetent, and we will make sure you end up in a state-run nursing home where you belong. Miles pressed stop. The silence in the room was heavy. She threatened you, he stated. She threatened to have you committed if you didn't release funds you weren't legally allowed to. That's not a petition. That's extortion. So that's the plan, I said. We let them build their case and then we dismantle it piece by piece. Exactly, Miles said. We let them lie. We let Adam get on the stand and cry about his confused old father. We let Brooke testify about how worried she is. We let them commit perjury. We let them trap themselves so thoroughly that when we present the truth, the only thing the judge can do is grant our counter motion. Which is... Miles picked up one last file. It was slim, simple. A petition to the court. To formally affirm the breach of the character clause. To immediately and permanently dissolve the Adam Anderson Trust. And to transfer all $12,400,000 plus interest directly to the Clara Cabot Anderson Scholarship Fund. He looked at me. Are you absolutely sure, George, once this is done, it's done? He gets nothing. Not now. Not ever. I thought of the invoice. I thought of the way Adam stood there while Brooke insulted me. I thought of the lies in the affidavit. He already has nothing, Miles, I said. He just doesn't know it yet. Let's go to court. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. The Essex County Courthouse. I've never liked courthouses. They smell of stale coffee floor wax and desperation. I wore my one good suit. It's a dark wool, 20 years old, but perfectly pressed. It was the suit I wore to Clara's funeral. It felt appropriate. Miles was waiting for me on the steps, not looking at all like a lawyer. He was wearing a light gray suit that looked more like something you'd wear to a garden party. He was relaxed, smiling, as if we were about to go to lunch. That was his gift. He radiated a calm that was almost predatory. "George," he said, shaking my hand, "ready for the show. As I'll ever be, Miles." We walked inside. They were already there in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway. A little island of arrogant entitlement. Adam was pale. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, clearly bought for the wedding. He saw me and his eyes immediately darted to the floor. He couldn't look at me. Good. Brooke, on the other hand, was in her element. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, intimidating bun. She looked like an executioner. She stared right at me, a tiny, self-satisfied smirk on her lips. She thought she had won. Beside her were the Davenports, Philip and Diana, flown in from Texas. They looked bored, annoyed, as if this was all just a minor piece of housekeeping before the real party could begin. And their lawyer, a man who matched them perfectly. Slicked back hair, a $5,000 suit, and a briefcase that probably cost more than my car. He looked at Miles, sized up his light gray suit, and dismissed him. "Judge Velez," Miles whispered to me as we entered the small hearing room. "She doesn't suffer fools." We sat at our table. They sat at theirs. The room was small, suffocating. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Maria Velez entered. She looked tired and overworked, and she had zero patience. She looked at the file, then at the plaintiff's lawyer. "Mr. Stratton, is it?" she said, her voice flat. "This is an emergency hearing for incompetence. That's a high bar. This had better be good. Proceed." Mr. Stratton, the flashy lawyer, stood up. He oozed false sincerity. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is indeed a tragedy." He gestured toward Adam. "A family in crisis. A son forced to make a decision no son should have to make." He painted a picture. He described me, George Anderson, as a beloved patriarch who was now sadly succumbing to the ravages of time. He used words like cognitive decline, erratic, and detachment from reality. His behavior, Stratton said, has become a danger not only to himself, but to the significant family estate he is meant to be managing. An estate his late wife, Clara Anderson, left for the benefit of their only son, Adam. He paced. "Your Honor, we have evidence. Just last week, in response to a significant six-figure financial matter, Mr. Anderson sent this." He dramatically produced the photocopy of my $1 check. "Exhibit A, Your Honor. $1, with puppies on it. A baffling, childlike document. This, Your Honor, is not the action of a rational trustee." Judge Velez looked at the check. Her expression was unreadable. Stratton continued. "We are here to protect Mr. Anderson from himself, and to protect the assets his son is entitled to. I call my first witness, Ms. Brooke Davenport." Brooke walked to the stand. She was a vision of rehearsed, sorrowful beauty. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, so help her God. The irony was suffocating. "Ms. Davenport." Stratton began, his voice dripping with synthetic compassion. "You are engaged to Mr. Adam Anderson." "I am," she said, her voice soft, angelic. "And in the course of planning your wedding, you have had close interactions with the defendant, Mr. George Anderson." "Yes," she said. She pulled a silk handkerchief from her sleeve and dabbed at a perfectly dry eye. "It's been so difficult. Please tell the court what you've witnessed." "Oh, where to begin?" Brooke sighed as if the burden was too much to bear. He's just not there anymore. He's forgetful. He'll ask the same question 5 times in an hour. He forgets my name. He sometimes calls me Clara. I gripped the arm of my chair. That was a vicious lie. He called you by his late wife's name, Stratton asked, feigning shock. Yes, she whispered. It's heartbreaking. We try to be patient, but it's more than that. He's a danger. We get calls from his neighbors. He's left the stove on, twice. Gas filling the kitchen. Last week, Mrs. Gable next door said she found him wandering down the street in his bathrobe, completely lost, unable to find his own house. This was pure fabrication. Mrs. Gable was in Florida visiting her sister. Brooke was just inventing things, painting a masterful picture of a senile old man. And this check, Ms. Davenport. This $1 check. That was the breaking point, she said, her voice cracking. We had sent him the financial plan for the wedding, a contribution from his late wife's estate. He knows Adam is the beneficiary, and he sent that. He called Adam and was laughing about the puppies on the check. It wasn't a joke, Your Honor. It was a breakdown. We are terrified. We're terrified he will hurt himself. We're terrified he will take the entire family legacy, my fiancé's birthright, and donate it to a cat shelter or something just as erratic. She finally produced a real tear. We are just trying to protect him. We love him. We just want to move him to a safe, secure facility where he can be cared for and have Adam, his only son, take control of the finances as his mother always intended. She finished. It was a perfect performance. I could see the judge looking at me with a new expression. Pity. Stratton smiled. No further questions, Your Honor. Your witness, Mr. Cunningham. Miles stood up. He buttoned his light gray suit jacket. He looked more like a friendly college professor than a lawyer. Good morning, Ms. Davenport, he said, his voice pleasant. Good morning, she replied, still dabbing her eye. That was truly heartbreaking testimony, Miles said. You must be under terrible strain. It's been the hardest time of our lives, she agreed. Indeed. Now, Ms. Davenport, you testified that you are worried Mr. Anderson will dissipate his son's legacy. Is that correct? Yes, Adam's birthright. It's what Clara wanted. I see. You're very familiar with Clara's intentions, then. Of course, Brooke said, bristling slightly. I'm about to be her daughter-in-law. Then of course you must have read her will, Miles said. It wasn't a question. Brooke hesitated. I've been briefed on its contents. Adam is the sole beneficiary. He is, Miles agreed cheerfully. But you see, Ms. Davenport being a beneficiary and having a right to the money are two very different things. Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence the last will and testament of Clara Cabot Anderson. I was its author. The bailiff handed the thick bound document to the judge. Miss Davenport, since you are so concerned with Clara's intentions, perhaps you could read one for us, page 4, paragraph 3. It's marked. Brooke took the paper, her hands trembling slightly. She stared at it. I don't... Allow me, Miles said, pulling out his own copy. The character clause. It states, and I quote, "The assets of this trust may only be drawn by the beneficiary Adam Anderson upon demonstrating to the sole and absolute satisfaction of the trustee a life built on solid moral footing, defined as but not limited to unwavering loyalty, gratitude, and familial respect toward his father, George Anderson." Miles paused. The courtroom was silent. Brooke's face had gone from sorrowful to pale. Ms. Davenport, Miles continued, his voice no longer friendly, does banning a man from his son's wedding constitute unwavering loyalty? Objection! Stratton yelled, jumping to his feet. This is irrelevant. We are here to discuss my client's competence, not family squabbles. On the contrary, Your Honor, Miles said smoothly. It is entirely the point. The plaintiff's entire case is that my client is mismanaging a trust. We are simply establishing that there is no trust to mismanage because the beneficiary, Mr. Adam Anderson, has already breached the terms of the trust with his own despicable behavior. Overruled, the judge said, her eyes now fixed on Brooke. Answer the question, Ms. Davenport. We just thought he'd be uncomfortable, Brooke stammered. Uncomfortable, Miles mused. I see. And Ms. Davenport, you testified that my client's $1 check was erratic and hostile. You're half right. It was hostile, but it was far from erratic. In fact, it was the most rational and frankly restrained response one could have to this. Miles walked to his table and produced the leather-bound invoice. Exhibit C, Your Honor. An invoice for $150,000 sent by the plaintiffs to my client. The man they just swore is senile and confused. The man they banned from their wedding. He handed the invoice to the judge. Judge Velez read it. Her face, which had been pale with pity, was now turning a deep dark red with fury. She looked from the invoice to Brooke. They weren't asking a confused old man for help, Miles pressed on. They were extorting him. They were demanding he pay for a party he wasn't allowed to attend. And when he refused, when he sent a symbolic $1 protest, they came here and committed perjury to have him locked up and steal the rest. That's not true, Brooke shouted from the stand. We were worried. He is senile. He is paranoid. Paranoid, Ms. Davenport? Miles asked, his voice soft again. I suppose you'd have to be, wouldn't you? When your future daughter-in-law threatens to have you thrown in a state-run nursing home. I would never. Then I suppose, Miles said, pulling the small digital recorder from his pocket. This isn't your voice. He pressed play. Brooke's voice, cold and furious, filled the silent courtroom. You senile old fool. My father's lawyers are going to destroy you. We will have you declared mentally incompetent, and we will make sure you end up in a state-run nursing home where you belong. Miles pressed stop. The silence was absolute. Brooke was gray. Adam had his head in his hands. Philip Davenport was staring at his daughter as if he'd never seen her before. Judge Velez slowly took off her glasses. She placed them on the bench. She looked at Brooke, at Adam, at their lawyer. Her voice was quiet. Deadly. Mr. Stratton. Yes, Your Honor. In 20 years on this bench, I have never, ever witnessed such a flagrant, malicious, and disgusting abuse of the court system. This is not a petition. This is a conspiracy. She turned to Brooke. Ms. Davenport, you have committed perjury. You have lied under oath in a failed attempt to defraud a senior citizen and steal his estate. She turned to Adam. And you sat there and let her. You signed it. You tried to have your own father committed because you were greedy. It's despicable. Stratton tried to speak. Your Honor, my clients. Be quiet, Mr. Stratton. The petition to declare Mr. George Anderson incompetent is not only denied, it is dismissed with prejudice. I am referring Miss Davenport's and Mr. Anderson's testimony to the district attorney's office for a full review of perjury charges, and I am sanctioning your firm for filing this garbage. You'll be lucky if you still have a license to practice in this state by Monday. She slammed her gavel. This hearing is adjourned. She stood up to leave. One last thing, Your Honor, Miles called out. The judge paused, looking at him. We are, of course, filing our counter-petition, effective immediately, to formally affirm the breach of the character clause, to immediately and permanently dissolve the Adam Anderson Trust, and to transfer all $12,400,000 plus all accrued interest to the Clara Cabot Anderson Scholarship Fund. Adam let out a sound, a choked sob. No, please. Judge Velez looked at the original will on her desk. She looked at the invoice. She looked at Adam. Mr. Cunningham, she said, Consider it granted." She slammed the gavel again. "We are done here." The gavel slam echoed in my mind all the way home. It wasn't a sound of victory. It was the sound of a heavy ancient door closing, a thick oak door shutting on 45 years of my life. I drove the Bentley back to Montclair, parked it under the tarp, and walked into my house. The silence was total. No dripping faucet. No ringing phone. Just peace. I made myself a simple dinner. Scrambled eggs and toast. I sat at my kitchen table, the one Brooke had wiped with a silk handkerchief, and I ate. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet. The storm was over. The dead wood had been pruned. I knew, of course, that the storm was not over for them. I knew that Judge Velez's ruling hadn't just evaporated Adam's imaginary $12 million future. It had also left him with a very real, very immediate $150,000 past. The wedding. The contracts he and Brooke had signed. The deposits her father had not paid, expecting my trust fund to cover it all. The wedding was in 8 days. I slept. I slept for 10 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke up on Saturday. I worked in the garden. I went for a walk. I bought groceries. The phone did not ring. All of Saturday passed. Silence. I knew what that silence was. That was the silence of pure, unadulterated panic. That was the sound of Brooke screaming at Adam. That was the sound of Adam screaming at Brooke. That was the sound of the Davenports in their Texas mansion, realizing their daughter had merged with a man who was not only broke, but was now facing a perjury investigation and owed 6 figures for a party that hadn't even happened yet. That was the sound of them frantically calling their lawyers, trying to find a loophole, a different angle, another way to get at the money. And that was the sound of their lawyers after reading Clara's will, telling them the hard truth. It's ironclad. It's over. The call finally came on Sunday evening. I was reading a book about Roman architecture. The old rotary phone ringed through the house. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I calmly placed my bookmark, stood up, and walked to the kitchen. I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" For a moment there was no sound, just a ragged, wet gasp, like someone trying to breathe underwater. "Dad?" It was Adam. But it wasn't the furious, shrieking voice from the last call. It wasn't the confident, dismissive voice from the visit. This was a voice I hadn't heard in 30 years. It was the voice of a little boy who had just fallen off his bike and smashed his knee on the pavement. It was the sound of pure, terrified, broken desperation. "Dad, please, don't hang up, please." He wasn't shouting. He was sobbing, a deep, racking, ugly cry that tore at something ancient and primal inside me. "I'm here, Adam." My voice was quiet, not warm, not cold, just present. "Dad, I'm sorry," he choked out. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... I never... She told me to do it." The words came pouring out, a desperate, pathetic confession. "It was Brooke, Dad. It was all Brooke, she and her parents. They said you were senile. They told me you were trying to steal my money. They said the $1 check proved you were crazy. I believed them. I was stupid. I was so stupid. I said nothing. I just listened. I listened to my son, a 35-year-old man, try to blame his wife, his in-laws, anyone but himself. I'm sorry, Dad. I'll tell the judge, I'll tell everyone. Just please, Japo, you have to help me." "Help you with what, Adam?" I asked. "The judge has already made her ruling." "Not the court, Dad." "The wedding," he cried, his voice rising in panic. "The contracts, Brooke's father, Philip, he called the country club. He called the caterer. He canceled the checks. He said I was the one who lied. He said I committed fraud. He says I'm responsible for the $150,000, not him. And are you? I asked. What? No, I signed the contracts, but I thought I had the money. The trust, my trust. It was never your trust, Adam. It was Clara's test, and you failed. I know, he screamed. God. Dad. I know I get it. I failed. I'm a horrible person. I'm a failure. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted? What I wanted, Adam, was a son. What I have is a man who tried to have his father committed to a nursing home to pay for a party. There was a long, terrible wail on the other end. Please, he whispered. All the anger gone, replaced by a terrifying, hollow dread. Dad, they're going to ruin me. The club is going to sue. The caterer is going to sue. He's talking to his lawyers. He said he's going to have my wages garnished for the rest of my life. He said Brooke is annulling the marriage. That sounds like a very busy day, I said, my voice flat. Dad, stop, he begged. Please, you have money, I know you do. You don't have to be the trustee. Just be my father. Just this once, you're rich, I know you are. Miles called you the chairman. You can't let this happen. You can't let your only son be destroyed, $150,000. It's nothing to you. It's just money. It's just money, I repeated. I looked around my kitchen, at the old linoleum, at the worn countertops, at the dripping faucet I had fixed with my own hands. No, Adam, I said. It was never just money. That was the whole point. What does that mean? He sniffled. It means you're right about one thing. You signed the contracts. You made the promises. You're a grown man, and you're part of a merger, remember, and in a merger, you have to be able to cover your own debts. This is your business, Adam, not mine. Dad. No. Dad, please. What am I going to do? I'm ruined. Yes, I said. You are. You won't help me after everything. You're just going to let this happen, your son. My son. I said, my voice as cold and final as the gavel's slam would have never put me in this position. I hate you, he whispered, the desperation finally curdling into pure, impotent rage. I hate you. I know, I said, and for the first time I think I truly did. You made your choice, Adam, I said. You chose the Davenports. You chose Brooke. You chose the high-profile life. Now, go and live with your choice. I heard a sound. A gasp, a final choked sob, and then I placed the heavy black receiver back onto its cradle. The connection was cut. The line was dead. I stood in the silence of my kitchen. It was over. The last tie. Severed. The son I had raised, the boy Clara had worried about, was gone. And in his place was a stranger screaming into a dead phone. A stranger I had just finally let go. The Saturday of the wedding, October 12th, arrived with a painful, perfect clarity. The sky was a sharp, cloudless blue, and the autumn air in Montclair was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and damp leaves. It was the kind of day Clara and I would have spent in the garden, preparing the roses for the first frost. I woke up at 6, as I always do. I made my coffee on the stove. I read the newspaper. I did not look at the one good suit hanging in my closet, the dark wool I had worn to Clara's funeral. That suit was for mourning, and I was not in mourning. I realized, preparing for battle. I waited until 2 in the afternoon. I knew the ceremony was scheduled for 3. I went to the mudroom by the back door. I didn't put on my good suit. I put on the clothes I'd been wearing all week to dig up the dahlia bulbs. My oldest pair of jeans stained with soil at the knees, a faded red flannel shirt, the material worn thin at the elbows. I pulled on my heavy mud-caked work boots. I didn't shave. I ran a hand through my gray hair, letting it stand where it pleased. I looked at my reflection in the small, cracked mirror by the door. I was exactly who they had accused me of being. A simple, poor, disheveled old man. A man who would be out of place. A man who would make the governor uncomfortable. It was the perfect disguise. I didn't take the Bentley. I took my 20-year-old Ford pickup truck. The one with the persistent rattle in the engine and a long rust-colored scratch along the passenger side. The one Adam used to beg me to sell because it embarrassed him. The drive to the Davenport Country Club took 30 minutes. I drove through the massive ornate iron gates. The sign was new gold and black, designed to look old but failing. It screamed, "New money." I passed the golf course, a rolling green carpet that looked artificial. I passed the tennis courts where silent figures in white moved gracefully. My truck's rattling engine sounded like a cough in a cathedral. The main entrance was a disaster of luxury. Valets in bright red vests were sprinting back and forth trying to manage a logjam of black Escalades, white Teslas, and silver Porsches. I drove right past the chaos, past the grand fountain. I went around to the back of the massive clubhouse to the service entrance where the real work was done. I parked my old truck between a large refrigerated food supply van and a florist's van. No one even glanced at me. I was invisible. I was just part of the help. I got out. The air smelled of expensive perfume from the guests and cooking grease from the kitchen vents. I could hear the faint civilized sound of a string quartet playing somewhere on the main lawn. The ceremony was beginning. I didn't try to watch. I had no interest in seeing Brooke in her white dress or Adam pale and sweating in his tuxedo. I was not there for the ceremony. I was there for the reception. I was there for the bill. I walked around the side of the massive building, keeping to the shadows of the large manicured oak trees. I found a spot by a row of tall hedges near a set of large arched French doors that led into the main ballroom. The doors were propped open for the waiters. From there, I could see everything. The ballroom was grotesque. It looked like an explosion in a flower shop. There were towering centerpieces of white orchids, the ones Brooke had mentioned were being flown in from Hawaii. There were ice sculptures. There was a gold monogrammed A and B projected onto the polished dance floor. I stood there in the shadows, smelling of garden soil and old flannel, and I watched the 300 high-profile guests mingle. I saw men I recognized from the financial pages. I saw Governor Whitman laughing loudly. I saw Philip and Diana Davenport, the parents holding court like royalty accepting compliments, their faces masks of pure, triumphant arrogance. I looked for Adam and Brooke. They were probably still taking photographs. But I wasn't looking for them. I was looking for the person in charge. The person who was not having a good time. And then I saw her. A woman in a severe black pantsuit. She had a headset on the clear wire coiled behind her ear. She was holding a clipboard which she gripped so tightly her knuckles were white. This was the wedding planner. She was not smiling. She was not greeting guests. She was pacing at the back of the ballroom near the entrance to the kitchens. She kept looking at her cell phone. She would stare at it, her eyes wide, and then look up at Philip Davenport, who was laughing and shaking the governor's hand. She typed a furious text message. She shook her head. I saw her walk quickly to one of the catering captains. She spoke to him, her gestures sharp, fast, and angry. The captain's eyes widened. He said something back. She just shook her head again, more violently this time, and pointed toward the main bar. I looked at the bar. It was massive, stocked with hundreds of bottles of the most expensive liquor. But the three bartenders, they weren't pouring. They were standing still, polishing glasses that were already clean. The guests were flowing in from the ceremony, champagne flutes in hand, but the main bar was dark. It wasn't open. The wedding planner marched over to the head bartender. I was too far away to hear, but I could read the body language. She was demanding. He was unmoving. He shrugged, held up his hands as if to say, "Not my problem," and then pointed to his own phone. He hadn't been paid. The checks hadn't cleared. The final wire transfer had not arrived. The planner's face, even from 50 feet away, was a mask of pure, abject panic. She looked at her headset, spoke into it, and then looked at her watch. She was trapped. The checks that Philip Davenport had promised to cover, the checks that were supposed to be backed by my $12 million, had all bounced. Every single one. The $1 check had been a stone tossed into a pond. This was the tidal wave hitting the shore. I didn't smile. I just stood there in the shadows in my dirty boots. They had banned me because I was not appropriate. And now their entire appropriate event, their high-profile merger, was about to visibly and spectacularly collapse on itself. The string quartet still outside finished its song. There was a long, awkward pause, and then no new song started. They too were clearly waiting for a check. The silence was deafening. The guests were looking around confused. The wedding planner, now pale as a sheet, was speed-walking toward the kitchen. I saw her grab her phone and dial. I knew who she was calling. It was time. I stepped out from the shadows of the hedges and began to walk toward the service entrance. I walked slowly toward the service entrance, my muddy boots making no sound on the expensive flagstone path. The chaos was beautiful. Through the kitchen doors, I could see chefs standing still, their arms crossed, tall white hats tilted in conference. Waiters were huddled by the ice machines, not loading trays but whispering. The whole multi-$100,000 event was grinding to a halt. The woman in the black pantsuit, the wedding planner, burst through the kitchen doors, her face pale and slick with sweat. She wasn't just stressed, she was terrified. This was a career-ending failure, and she knew it. She jabbed a number into her phone. "Philip, pick up, you coward!" she hissed into the voicemail. "The bar is closed, the string quartet is packing up, and the chef says he won't plate the appetizers until the wire transfer clears. You told me it was guaranteed. You told me the groom's family had it covered." She hung up, shaking. She looked like she was about to be physically ill. I stepped out from the shadow of a large potted ficus tree. I kept my voice soft, harmless, confused. "Excuse me, ma'am, I think there might be a problem with the music." She spun around, her eyes wide with panic. She looked at me, at my mud-stained jeans, my thin flannel shirt, my gray, uncombed hair. I could see her mind processing me in a millisecond: gardener, janitor, irrelevant old man. "What?" she snapped. "I don't have time for this. Go find your supervisor." "Oh, I don't work here," I said, offering a small apologetic smile. I'm a guest. Sort of. I'm George Anderson, the groom's father." Her jaw dropped. She stared at me. She looked at my boots. She looked at my face. She looked at my flannel shirt. Her professional mask cracked wide open, revealing the raw panic underneath. You're George Anderson," I repeated politely. "Adam's dad. I heard you shouting just now. Something about the groom's family having it covered. It sounds like there's a problem with the payment." She looked from me to the grand ballroom, then back to me, as if trying to solve an impossible math equation. This old dirty man could not possibly be the groom's family responsible for the six-figure bill. There's an issue," she stammered, trying to regain her composure. "The final payments, the wire transfers, they were rejected. All of them." "All of them?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Goodness, that's terrible. How much are we talking about?" "A lot," she said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "The $50,000 hold for the clubhouse declined. The $75,000 wire for catering and the bar reversed. The checks we did get, they all bounced this morning. Bounced like there's no money, like the account is frozen." "Frozen," I said. "Oh, that's just dreadful. How could that be?" Internally, I knew exactly how. I pictured Miles Cunningham sitting in his office that morning on the phone with the bank's legal department. "That's correct," I imagined Miles saying, his voice smooth as silk. Mr. Adam Anderson has just filed a petition declaring his father the trustee mentally incompetent, citing erratic financial behavior. As the estate's legal counsel, and given this pending litigation, I am formally requesting an immediate emergency hold on all accounts associated with Mr. Adam Anderson, as he is clearly financially compromised and poses a significant risk to the trust. We can't have him dissipating assets he doesn't own, can we? Adam, in his infinite arrogance, had not only given me the character clause violation, he had given Miles the legal justification to cut off his own lifeline hours before his wedding. The checks he and Brooke had written, assuming the trust fund money was already theirs, had all just hit a brick wall of ice. I don't know how, the planner was saying, her voice cracking. Mr. Davenport assured me the money was there. He said the groom's trust was paying for this, he said. Wait. She stopped. She looked at me, really looked at me. The confusion in her eyes was slowly being replaced by a horrifying, dawning realization. You said, the payment for the groom's family, she said slowly. Yes, I said. And you're the groom's father. I am. And you're the trustee. I am that too, I said, giving her a gentle smile. Her face, which had been pale, turned a blotchy, violent red. The blood drained from it, then rushed back. You're the one. You knew. You let this happen. Well, ma'am, I said, I was told I was banned from the wedding. I assumed that meant I was banned from paying for it too. It seems my son wanted a contribution, but not my presence. I suppose you can't have one without the other. Oh my God, she whispered. She backed away from me, the clipboard falling from her hand and clattering onto the flagstones. Oh my God! Philip, Diana! She wasn't just talking. She was shrieking. Philip, he's here! He's the one! It's all a lie! The French doors to the ballroom burst open. It wasn't just the Davenports. It was the wedding party. Adam in his tight tuxedo, his face slick with sweat. Brooke in her massive white gown, her face a mask of confusion and rage. And behind them, Philip and Diana Davenport, their expressions frozen in triumphant smiles, clearly walking out to see what their planner was yelling about. They all froze on the patio, their eyes locked onto the planner who was pointing a trembling finger at me. Then their gazes shifted. They followed her finger, and they saw me. Standing by the service entrance, in my dirt-stained jeans and my old flannel shirt, my muddy boots planted firmly on their expensive flagstone. The string quartet was silent. The bar was closed. The guests were peering through the windows, wondering where the food was, and the entire wedding party, the groom, the bride, and their arrogant, high-profile parents were staring in mute, absolute horror. Not at a monster, not at a corporate raider, but at a simple, poor, senile old man who it turned out held the kill switch to their entire world. Dad, Adam whispered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? Adam's voice was a thin, reedy whisper. Dad, what are you doing here? He looked at my muddy boots, at my flannel shirt, as if his brain had short-circuited. He couldn't compute the image he was seeing. Before I could answer, Brooke pushed past him. Her beautiful, smiling bridal mask had vanished. Her face was tight, pale, and contorted with a rage so pure it was almost impressive. She wasn't just angry. She was confused. This wasn't part of her plan. You, she hissed. Her voice wasn't a shout. It was a pressurized spray of venom that cut through the cool evening air. What are you doing here? I banned you. I told you you were not allowed to come. Adam, ever the coward, reached for her arm. Brooke, honey, calm down. She ripped her arm out of his grasp, as if his touch had burned her. Don't touch me, Adam. He's doing this. This is him. I knew it. You're trying to ruin my wedding. Philip Davenport, her father, a large man who radiated an aura of cheap cologne and entitlement, stepped forward. He looked at me, his eyes sweeping from my muddy boots to my gray hair, as if I were a piece of garbage that had blown onto his property. "I'm going to ask you to leave. Now. Security." He looked around for a uniformed guard, but the valets were busy with the Porsches and the rest of the staff. Well, the rest of the staff were the problem. "There is no security." The voice that shrieked the words didn't belong to me or to the family. It was the wedding planner. Her black pantsuit was immaculate, but her face was crumbling. She stormed over to Philip, her professional mask completely gone, replaced by the raw, jagged panic of a woman watching her career go up in flames. "There is no security, Philip!" she screamed, jabbing a finger at his expensive tuxedo. "There is no bar. There is no chef. The kitchen staff is walking out. Your checks bounced." "That's a lie." Diana, the mother, gasped, clutching the massive diamond necklace at her throat. "That's impossible. We are the Davenports." "I don't care if you're the Rockefellers," the planner shrieked. Her voice was now loud enough for the first few rows of guests in the ballroom to hear. "The bank has reversed all payments. The account is frozen. We are $125,000 short. And that," she pointed at a massive melting ice sculpture of a swan, "is not free." She looked at Philip. She looked at Brooke. She looked at Adam. "You have 10 minutes." She said it slowly, enunciating every syllable. "That is the grace period my chef has given me before he wheels the uncooked sea bass and the lobster tails back onto the refrigerated truck. 10 minutes to get me a certified check or a completed wire transfer. After that, I call the police for fraud, and I sue all of you, every single one of you, for breach of contract." The air crackled. A time bomb had just been activated. 10 minutes. Philip Davenport's face turned a shade of purple I had only ever seen on a bad eggplant. He spun on Adam, who looked like he was about to faint. "You," Philip growled, getting right in Adam's face. You did this." "What, me?" Adam stammered, physically recoiling. I didn't do anything." "You lied," Philip roared, spittle flying from his mouth. "You came to me. You sat at my table in my club in Dallas. You told me you were the sole heir to the Anderson Cabot Trust. You guaranteed this. You said your father was a simple man, but the money was ironclad." "It is," Adam cried, his voice cracking. He looked past his furious father-in-law, his eyes wide with naked panic locking on me. "Dad, tell them about the trust. Tell them you're just confused. Fix this, Dad." He was begging me. My son, the son who had disowned me from this very party, was now begging me in front of his new terrifying family to pay for it. I just stood there. My hands were buried deep in the pockets of my old jeans. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Brooke turned on Adam. Her face was no longer angry. It was white with a slow, dawning horror. She had just connected the dots. She had seen the planner's panic, heard her father's accusation, and now she was looking at me, her confused father-in-law, standing there in muddy boots watching her dream collapse. He can't, can he?" she whispered. She looked at my old Ford truck parked in the service lot. She looked at my calm, quiet face. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Philip was right. You're a liar." "No, Brooke, I'm not," Adam cried, tears now streaming down his face. "Dad, tell them about the money. Tell them to stop." "You married me!" she screamed, her voice breaking into a hysterical shriek that echoed across the silent golf course. "You married me, and you're broke. You're a fraud. You have nothing. You're nothing." "I'm not!" Adam yelled back, finally pushing Philip away. He was sobbing now, a desperate, cornered animal. "The trust, it's my money. He's just being mean. He's punishing me because I didn't invite him, Dad. Please, I'm begging you." All eyes turned to me. The $300,000 wedding. The merger of two great families. The high-profile event. The future of the Davenports' social standing. All of it was hanging in the balance. And I was just a quiet old man, in a flannel shirt smelling faintly of garden soil. "He's right," I said. My voice was calm. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the hysteria like a razor. Adam's head snapped up. His sobbing stopped. "What? He's right," I repeated, looking directly at Philip Davenport. "Adam is the sole beneficiary of the Clara Anderson Trust. It is, as you said, quite large and ironclad." A single shaky breath of relief escaped Adam's lips. Brooke's eyes widened with hope. Philip narrowed his still suspicious. "Then pay them," Philip demanded, gesturing to the apoplectic wedding planner. "Stop this idiotic, childish game and pay the bill." "I can't," I said simply. "What do you mean you can't?" Brooke shrieked, the hope vanishing. "You're the trustee Adam told us. You just sign the check. Do it." I said, taking a small step toward them, "that the account is, as your planner so accurately noted, frozen. It's completely locked. Nothing can go in and nothing can come out." Adam's face crumpled. "Frozen why?" "Who you did this? You sabotaged me." "No, Adam," I said, looking my son dead in the eye. "You did." "What are you talking about, old man?" Philip growled. "Spit it out. We're on a clock. You see, Mr. Davenport," I said, my voice as patient as if I were explaining something to a child. "Your lawyers are very good. But my wife's lawyers, they were better. My wife Clara was a very, very smart woman. She knew Adam. She loved him, but she knew him. She knew he craved approval. She knew he was susceptible to people who valued this." I gestured to the dripping, useless ice swan over this. I tapped my chest over my heart. "So she put a clause in her will," I continued. "A character clause. It was a test, you see." They all just stared at me. "Adam would only inherit his $12 million, I said, savoring the number. I saw Brooke and her parents flinch. They hadn't even known the correct amount. "He would only get that money if he could prove to my soul and absolute satisfaction that he was a man of integrity, responsibility, and, here's the beautiful part, unwavering loyalty and respect to his father." Adam's face went from pale to the color of ash. He knew what was coming. "The minute you called me to ban me from this wedding, Adam, you failed the test. The minute you and Brooke sent me that $150,000 invoice for a party I wasn't allowed to attend, you signed your own disinheritance." That's not legal," Philip sputtered. "You can't just... It's subjective. We'll fight this." "Oh, it's 100% legal," I said. "And it was subjective. It was all up to my discretion. But then your family... You Tom decided to make it objective. You filed a petition. You swore to a judge on Monday morning that I was senile and incompetent." I smiled. "You can't have it both ways. You can't argue in court that I'm too senile to manage a checkbook, and then in the same week demand I authorize a $150,000 wire transfer. You legally proved my point for me. You proved you were acting with malice. You proved you had no respect. You, Mr. Davenport, and your daughter and my son. You all personally handed a judge the evidence needed to terminate that trust. Forever." 8 minutes, the wedding planner said, her voice hollow. She was just looking at her watch now, completely detached. Brooke looked at Adam. Her face was no longer angry. It was dead. $12 million, she whispered. Adam just stared at me, his mouth open, making no sound. 12 million, I confirmed. And all you had to do was invite your father to your wedding. 10 minutes are up, the planner announced loudly, her voice cracking with the strain. That's it. We're done. Shut it down. Call the police. She turned and marched back toward the kitchen, screaming into her headset. Shut it down. All staff out. We're evacuating the building. The client has defaulted. Philip Davenport let out a noise, a low, animalistic groan from the back of his throat. You bastard. You ruined me. Brooke didn't scream again. She just looked at Adam, her eyes completely vacant. And then she did something I will never forget. She reached up very slowly and with a vicious twist pulled the massive glittering diamond engagement ring off her finger. She didn't throw it. She just opened her hand and dropped it. It hit the flagstone with a tiny, insignificant tink. "I want an annulment," she said, her voice flat. "I'm calling my lawyer." She turned her massive white dress swishing and walked away from Adam toward her father. Adam just stood there alone looking at the ring on the ground. And then the lights in the grand ballroom went out, one by one. Clack, clack, clack. The guests who had been peering out suddenly erupted into shouts of confusion and anger. The merger was over. The party was done. The nightmare had begun. I turned my back on the chaos, on my son, on the ruins of their perfect day, and began to walk. I was almost at the edge of the patio, almost back in the shadows of the service entrance. I could hear the chaos erupting inside the ballroom. The music hadn't just stopped. It was replaced by the scraping of chairs and the sound of 300 confused, angry voices. The lights were on, harsh and bright, exposing the undressed tables and the empty bar. It was no longer a party. It was an eviction. Then I heard his voice, no longer a scream, but a desperate, broken plea. "Dad, wait, please." I stopped. I didn't turn around. Not yet. I heard footsteps running on the flagstone, the awkward, stumbling sound of a man in dress shoes that were too tight. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, desperate. "Dad, you can't." He panted, his face pale and glistening with sweat. "You can't just walk away. Please, please." I turned slowly to face him. He was a mess. His tuxedo was rumpled, his bow tie undone. He was crying, his breath catching in ugly, hitching sobs. "It's already done, Adam," I said, my voice flat. "No, it's not." "We can fix it," he cried. Just tell them you were joking. Tell them it was a test. I'll apologize. I'll get on my knees. Right now, I'll do anything." He was actually starting to sink to his knees right there on the patio. Then Brooke was there, her face a terrifying mask of streaked makeup and pure primal hatred. She wasn't crying. She was vibrating with rage. She grabbed Adam by his tuxedo jacket and yanked him back to his feet. "Stop groveling," she shrieked at him. "He's not going to help. Can't you see he did this?" She then turned that rage on me. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "You think you're so clever, you bitter old snake. You ruined my life, my life." "I did nothing, Brooke," I said calmly. "I just declined to pay for your party, a party you banned me from." "He's right, Brooke. It's over." It was Philip Davenport. He and his wife Diana were standing right behind her. Diana was sobbing into a handkerchief, her shoulders shaking. Philip, however, looked like he had aged 10 years. The purple rage was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. He ignored his daughter. He ignored Adam. He walked right up to me, close enough that I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "George," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Let's be adults. You've made your point. You've humiliated my daughter. You've embarrassed my family. Bravo. Now name your price." I just looked at him. "What?" he snapped. "What do you want?" 100,000 too. You want me to apologize?" "Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry my daughter thinks you're a senile old fool. Now fix this. Pay the planner. Get the lights turned back on." I almost smiled. Even now, he thought this was a negotiation. He thought he could buy his way out. "It's not for sale, Philip," I said. Diana, his wife, finally spoke, her voice thick with tears. "Please, George, think of the scandal, the shame, our friends, the governor. They're all in there. This will ruin us. It will ruin Brooke." She was pleading, but not for my forgiveness. She was pleading for her reputation. "You should have thought of that," I said, "before you decided to judge me by my gardening clothes." I'll pay you, Adam blurted out, a new desperate idea striking him. When I get a job, I'll pay you back. All of it, the 150,000, just cover it. Please, Dad, it's my wedding. That was the moment. The final desperate plea from the man-child who had caused it all. He still didn't get it. He was still trying to bargain, still trying to use money he didn't have to fix a problem he had created. He was still... Adam, I looked at him, at his tear-streaked, terrified face. You're right, Adam, I said. It is your wedding. I reached into the pocket of my old flannel shirt. Their eyes followed my hand. Adam's hopeful. Brooke's suspicious. Philip's confused. They thought I was reaching for a checkbook. I took out my hand, and I opened my palm. I held his gaze. My son. This desperate, broken stranger in a ruined tuxedo. He was still begging, his hands clasped together, as if in prayer, his eyes flooded with tears. Dad, please. I'll do anything. Just pay them. I'm begging you. Philip and Diana were silent, watching me. Brooke was watching me, her face a pale, frozen mask of hatred. But her eyes were still desperate. They still, even now, thought I was their only way out. They thought my love for my son or my fear of their shame would finally make me open my wallet. You're right, Adam, I said. My voice was quiet, and they all leaned in to hear it. You'll do anything. And you're right. I should contribute. I reached slowly into the pocket of my old flannel shirt. I saw Adam's eyes lock onto my hand. A tiny, pathetic flicker of hope ignited in his face. He thought I was reaching for my checkbook. He thought I was finally giving in. Philip Davenport even took a half step back, straightening his tie, already preparing to reassume his role as the master of the house. My hand came out of my pocket. I wasn't holding my wallet. I was holding a single, small, folded piece of paper. The check with the puppies on it. The one I had mailed to him 3 days ago. The one Miles had gotten back from the bank as evidence. I had kept it. I had kept it for this exact moment. I held it between my thumb and forefinger. Adam stared at it. He didn't understand. What is that? Philip snapped. I didn't look at him. I looked at Adam. I unfolded the check. I held it up in the harsh light of the patio. $1. Adam's breath hitched. He knew exactly what it was. Brooke let out a sound, a small strangled gasp. You asked me to help, I said to my son. You asked me to contribute. I held the check out to him. Here, I said, my voice perfectly level, perfectly calm. My contribution, it's all yours. Adam just stared at the piece of paper as if it were on fire. I don't understand, he whispered, though his eyes showed that he understood all too well. I smiled. It was a small, sad smile. It was the last smile I would ever give him. You should be thankful, Adam, I said, my voice soft, letting each word land with the weight of a stone. You should be thankful that I'm letting you contribute. I repeated his own words, the words from his note. The look on his face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the hollow, empty, shattering expression of a man who finally, in that single instant, understood that the game was over, that he had lost everything. I didn't wait for a reply. I let the check for $1 drift from my fingers. It fluttered in the air for a moment, a stupid, pathetic little piece of paper, and landed at his feet. I turned my back on all of them. On my son, on his ruined bride, on their angry, humiliated in-laws. I turned my back on the entire pathetic, noise-filled mess. I turned my back. That was the only movement I made. I turned my back on my son, who was frozen staring at the $1 check lying on the ground between his expensive, useless shoes. I turned my back on Brooke, whose face had gone from red rage to a horrifying slack-jawed ashen gray. I turned my back on Philip and Diana Davenport, who were staring at me as if I had just transformed into a creature they had no name for. I heard the sound behind me. It was Brooke. She made a noise, a low guttural sound from the back of her throat like an animal. And then she just collapsed. Her legs buckled and she fell to the ground in a heap of white silk and lace, a ruined monument to her own greed. Adam didn't move to catch her. He was still paralyzed, lost. Philip was the first to react, but he didn't run to his daughter. He lunged at me. You can't just walk away." He grabbed my shoulder. I stopped. I didn't turn. I just spoke over my shoulder, my voice calm and final. "Take your hand off me, Philip." I don't know what he heard in my voice. Maybe the authority of a man who had chaired boards. Maybe the coldness of a man who had just disowned his only child. But he flinched. His hand dropped. "Security!" he roared again, but it was pathetic now. "Somebody, stop him!" But no one moved. The wedding planner was already on her phone, speaking in a low, furious voice, undoubtedly to her own lawyer. And then the sound of the ballroom finally broke open. The shouting began. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was outrage. I heard a man, his voice booming with authority. It sounded like the governor yell, "What in God's name is the meaning of this? The bar is closed." I heard Diana Davenport let out a high-pitched, hysterical wail. "My party, my daughter, he's ruined everything." I didn't look back. I just walked. I walked off the flagstone patio, past the melting ice swamp one that was weeping onto the grass. I walked past the darkened ballroom, where the 300 high-profile guests were now just a confused, angry mob in expensive clothes. And I walked past the kitchens, where the chefs were already loading their uncooked sea bass back onto the trucks. I walked along the service road, my muddy boots crunching on the gravel. I could still hear Brooke's sobs, a thin, desperate sound in the perfect, crisp October air. I reached my truck, my old rusty Ford pickup parked between the florist's van and the catering truck. The drivers were leaning against their vehicles, smoking cigarettes, watching the chaos at the clubhouse with bored amusement. "Looks like the party's over, old-timer," one of them said to me, gesturing with his cigarette. "It would seem so," I replied. I put my hand on the cold metal door of my truck, and I saw him. Miles. He was leaning against his own car, a quiet, dark sedan parked in the shadows. He wasn't smiling. He just nodded once, a simple gesture of acknowledgement, of a job done. I nodded back. He got into his car and started the engine. I got into mine. The old Ford engine rattled to life, loud and obnoxious in the sudden silence of the country club. I drove away first. As I pulled onto the main road, I looked in my rearview mirror. I could see Adam. He had finally moved. He was standing in the middle of the driveway, illuminated by the headlights of the departing Porsches and Escalades, a lone, pathetic figure in a ruined tuxedo. Brooke was still on the ground. Her parents were screaming at the wedding planner, who was screaming right back. I turned the corner, and they all disappeared. I drove home to Montclair. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the rattle of my old truck, and I felt quiet. I heard, of course, you always hear. The fallout was spectacular. I heard the wedding planner did sue the Davenports and Adam jointly for the full $150,000 plus damages. I heard the Davenports in their rage countersued Adam for fraud, citing the $12 million trust that didn't exist. They wanted the money for the ring, the deposits, and I quote, "emotional distress and public humiliation." I heard the governor's office released a statement the next day about attending a charity function that was unfortunately canceled due to a private family dispute, distancing himself immediately. The merger had become a public execution. Brooke, as promised, filed for an annulment. It was granted in record time, citing fraud. I imagine she didn't want to be legally tied to a man who was now, by all accounts, facing $500,000 in lawsuits. Her perfect wedding had turned her into a laughingstock, a story her high-profile friends would tell for years. That I knew was a fate worse than death for a Davenport. The $12 million plus the 20 years of interest it had accrued was transferred as per Clara's will into the Clara Cabot Anderson Scholarship Fund. Miles and I had our first board meeting. We funded the architectural educations of 50 students in the first year alone. Clara's legacy was finally safe. And Adam. He called, of course. He called every day for a month. His messages at first were furious. Then they became pleading. Then they were just silent, broken sobs into the voicemail begging me to pick up. I never did. I heard he declared bankruptcy. It was the only way out. He lost the lawsuit from the Davenports. He lost the lawsuit from the wedding planner. He lost the condo. He lost the BMW. Last I heard from a neighbor who saw him, Adam works at a Home Depot in the next county over. He works in the lumber department. He's paying off his court-ordered debts one minimum wage paycheck at a time. He lives in a small rented room above a garage. Sometimes he sends me letters, handwritten. They're full of "I'm sorry" and "she made me do it," and "please, I'm still your son." I read the first one. I don't read them anymore. I sold the house in Montclair. The memories were too thick, and the faucet, no matter how many times I fixed it, always seemed to start dripping again. I bought a small place up in the Hudson Valley, a stone cabin with 2 acres of land. It's quiet. It's mine. I have a new garden now. I sit on my porch and I watch the sun set over the trees. I'm 71 years old. I am by all definitions completely alone. I have no wife. I have no son. But for the first time in my entire life, I am completely, utterly, and finally at peace. Clara was right. She always was. She knew that true wealth wasn't the money she had. It was the character she tried to build. And if you didn't have character, you didn't deserve the money. My son thought he could ban me from his life and still send me the bill. He learned the hard way that I was the one holding the checkbook. And I had finally decided that his account was closed. This story is a powerful reminder that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in character. It teaches us that greed, arrogance, and disrespect, especially towards family, carry a devastating price. Underestimating someone based on their simple lifestyle or perceived weakness is a profound mistake. True power lies not in what you can buy, but in the integrity you hold. Betraying loyalty for financial gain doesn't just cost you an inheritance. It costs you your dignity, your family, and ultimately, your self-respect. What do you think of the lesson Adam and Brooke learned? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please like and subscribe for more stories like this.